What up, everyone? It is time for the TrendSpider Chart Roundup. I have Jake Wujastyk here that way. Jake, how was your weekend? How we doing?
Hey, it was great. We're doing good. Ready to do some chart review, some overview, or the roundup of charts, whatever we want to call it. We're going to look over quite a few charts today. So let's dive right into it.
Let's rip through some charts, starting with the SPY, I presume.
Yep. As always, just want to go over kind of a high-level overview, broad market, SPY, QQQ, IWM. IWM was definitely the winner for today. It seems like small caps are ready to break out. I mean, you can see a lot of strength in growth. You can see a lot of strength in these small cap names finally catching a bid. And a lot of that capital is actually kind of being vacuumed out of these larger cap names like your Apples, your Amazons. And that capital has to go somewhere. When prices are dropping, people are selling shares, and that allows that capital to flow into other parts of the market, which is essentially rotation. So the main thing that I want to go over on SPY is, one, we're just completely stuck. I mean, this thing has really not moved at all, really, in a month. Now, obviously, it's moved, but as far as the range goes, we're pretty much right at the top of the range. We haven't broken new highs. We haven't really broken down. We're just kind of trading within this weird range. On the daily side of things, you can see we have a pretty big megaphone type formation here, broadening formation. And one of the main things that I want to point out here, looking at the volume. So if you look at the volume, you'll notice here at the bottom of my screen or below this megaphone pattern, we have something called the relative volume indicator. So what that does is it allows you to see, is volume above a specific X amount of day moving average? Is it below? So what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the 50-day average volume, and anything that is in this green shaded area is going to be above average volume. So this let's just highlight it and make it yellow so you guys can see. Anything that is above this yellow line is pretty much your average. So if the volume for the day is right at that yellow line, it means we're trading right at the 50-day average. Anytime in this case over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, or maybe even a little more than that, 2.5 weeks, you can see that the volume is this red shaded area. So that means we're trading below the 50-day average volume as we were moving up. So that's definitely something to consider, that we are moving up on below average volume. Can that change? Yes, it can very easily. And notice the only time we've really had above average volume over the last month and a half were these bigger red days. So we haven't really had an up day with above average volume. So that's something to consider. This really big move down on May 12th. You can see this green shaded area. That was a big down day. So for now, the above average volume is happening on the downside rather than the upside. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out here on SPY, and this is something we've talked about before, is using raindrop charts and using candlesticks, regular candles, hollow candles together. So if you're not familiar with a raindrop chart, remember it's a volume weighted chart. Instead of open and close, we're looking at the volume weighted average price for the first and the second half of the candlestick time frame. In this case, we're on the daily chart. So notice what happened on June 3rd, which was last Thursday. We have this red candle. So we have a red close on the day. We closed below for Wednesday's close. But notice here what we have on the raindrop. We have a green raindrop showing that the volume weighted average price during the second half of the day was higher than the first half. So from a relative volume perspective, buyers were actually kind of in control versus looking at the open. It's slightly different. Now, anytime you do have a hollow red candle, I do like to look at that as potentially, a pretty strong indication that at least buyers are in control, because your close is higher than your open, which creates the hollow red candle instead of the solid red candle. So remember, anytime you have a solid candle, it means that the close is lower than the open. Anytime you have a hollow candle, it means that the close is higher than the open. So kind of opening the window shade, closing the window shade. Anytime you see a hollow candle, you're opening the window shade, your close is higher than your open. So here, the fact that we did have a green raindrop on Thursday and a red candle was a decent signal that, we could be reversing, and maybe this isn't too big of a, too big of a deal. We essentially just bounced off this anchored VWAP from the May 19th swing low here. So the reason I bring this up is notice today we had a red close, but we had a green raindrop. Barely a green raindrop, but it was a green raindrop. So that is definitely something to consider. Now, when you're looking at the charts, when you're looking at technical analysis, you always want to look at multiple different variables in the equation, different tools that you want to pull out of the toolbox. So one thing that is a little interesting going into tomorrow, looking at the day of the week seasonality, you'll see here that Tuesday is by far the worst performing day of the week so far in 2021. So what does that mean? It means that with a 32% win rate, only 32% of the time does Tuesday close higher than Monday's close. So going into Tuesday, that is something to consider on the bearish side of things, that this is, historically speaking, so far in 2021, the worst performing day of the week. Now, notice what happens into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We have pretty strong seasonality win rates, 64% win rate for Wednesday, 68% for Thursday, and 62% for Friday. So the second half of the week is definitely stronger so far this year than the first half of the week. And so we'll have to see if we get the follow through with the green raindrop versus the red candle, or we go into some of that weak seasonality for Tuesday. One thing to consider is the fact that the rest of the market was pretty strong. The Qs closed green. So you can see here that we kind of have this broadening formation on the Qs as well. If you anchored the volume by price from the start of this broadening formation, you can essentially see the volume profile of this pattern. So that's something that's really nice using the anchored volume by price on TrendSpider, because you simply just move this around. Anywhere that you stop is where it's going to start measuring the volume profile. So here, if we move this vertical line to where the start of the megaphone pattern is, we're now essentially looking at the volume profile of this megaphone. So this broadening formation, if whatever you want to call it, you can see here that we are finally starting to break above this volume shelf. Remember, a volume shelf is an area where you have a lot of shares holding. And notice here, we were able to move pretty quickly through this volume gap right here. And it could be a continued runner into midweek, because you don't have a lot of shares above until we get to around 340 at this point. So remember, this area is going to act as supply simply because these shares are holding at an unrealized loss right now. As the price moves back up to around 340, these shares will be back at break even. Some shareholders, some traders are going to take some off the table as they get back to break even. And that's why this is essentially a supply zone once we get up to this area. Now, same thing on the Qs. Tuesday is the worst performing day of the week. And one thing that I will comment on is the fact that if you look at the raindrop chart, we don't have a lot of volume at the top of the range. And that's not necessarily meaning that we can't move up tomorrow, but there's not as much conviction by buyers as I'd like to see. This is different on the IWM side of things. We did have quite a bit of volume at the top of the range today, where the Qs just didn't have as much volume. We didn't have that kind of balloon forming. So going into tomorrow, the bearish thesis would be it is the weakest day of the trading week so far in 2021, with only a 36% win rate. But going into tomorrow, we are already going into this volume gap where you don't have a lot of liquidity above, meaning that the price can move up very quickly because you don't have a lot of friction. You don't have a lot of shares that you're trying to get through until we get to around that 339, 340 mark. Remember, you always want to look at zones. There's nothing wrong with saying, oh yeah, my resistance above is 339.64. But at the same time, you generally want to have a zone. So instead of 339.64, maybe you say 339.50 to 340. So that gives you a little more flexibility there. And that's the nice thing about TrendSpider. So let's say that we did want to put an alert right up here, let's say right at 339.62. If you create an alert around this line, you're able to create that sensitivity around it. So you're being alerted at a zone rather than just this exact price point. So you can see here as I move this purple area gets bigger and smaller. So make sure to check out that. when you are setting your alerts on the platform. So the Q's looking pretty good. The weekly side of things, if we are, going to look at the weekly side, this is what I'm pretty bullish about. Notice that we've got a pretty solid ascending triangle here. So if I just turn off the volume profile, you can see here that, we've been kind of coiling now for a while. And you can see that we are getting close to the apex of this ascending triangle. We'd really want to break through about 342 for this to really get going. But for now, it is looking pretty strong. This would be the 4th green week in a row. So keep that in mind. The last time we had 4 green weeks in a row, we did kind of top out at this resistance. But, it could be different this time. So overall, long term, I'm generally looking at the longer term anyways. I'm looking at the daily chart, the weekly, the monthly. Not really paying attention to intraday. I'm more of a position trader. I can hold a position for a month. I'm not looking at these intraday moves unless I'm trying to enter or exit. So IWM is the next one. And this is one that really is starting to look very good. And this is why I do think the month of June is going to be, quote unquote, the month of the small caps. So if you look at the volume by price here, if we anchor from the COVID lows, you'll just see a ton of volume holding here. Look at how much volume is aggregating here. And there's a reason for that. We have been trading in this range since the beginning of February. So the more that we trade in this area, the more aggregation of volume that we're going to get. Now, the nice thing is, notice that we are finally starting to break above this volume shelf. So anytime you have that type of breakout or that move to the upside, that is a really strong indication that we could really make a pretty strong move. And we've been just trading here for over 3 months. It's time for this to make a move. And if we do resolve to the upside, this could be a pretty strong move. This is where I'd probably pull up the fibs, because we don't have any, once we break this previous high back in March, we don't have anything to go off of. So, what I would do is I'd probably do a fib from this, probably from this here point to this point. So the 1.618 extension would be around 250 on IWM if this really broke this previous high. So remember, anytime you do have a previous high that you're not at yet, that's going to be your resistance. But once you break above that and you don't have anything else to look at, that's when you use these fib extensions. And a lot of people are looking at these 0.618 extensions, and that's why they work so well, because they just become self-fulfilling prophecies. Now, one thing I didn't do yet is I didn't pull up the YouTube link here. So if there are any questions or anything, I'm not going to see them yet. But 1 second, we'll pull that up. Okay. Do we think Russell 2000 having a big cold spring breakout coming? Absolutely. I 100% think that is the case. Michael, I am very bullish on small caps right now. I do think they're going to outperform. I think biotech is also something that's going to outperform. We'll go on that here shortly. Let's see, just anything. How much AMC you got? Absolutely zero. I do not have any AMC. That's not really my style. But for those that did make money on AMC, that is awesome. Congrats to you. It was quite a trade. Just a little too volatile for my type of trading. I will go over some of the names that I'm in right now. But remember, that doesn't mean go buy those. I'll talk about some of the names that I'm currently in. But before that, let's continue the overview here. IWM, as I mentioned, looking really good. On the daily side of things, this is kind of what I was talking about before. We finally broke out of this symmetrical triangle here. So if you look at the daily chart, and let me make this a little bigger for you guys. That may be a little easier to see. Let's turn on the raindrop chart, and you'll notice what we have here. We've got quite a bit of volume, focused above this resistance line. So you can see here the volume profile at the top of the range. That is a bullish indication that there was conviction by buyers above resistance. Now, don't be surprised either if you have one of these. A retest of the previous breakout point is healthy. So if this moves down into tomorrow, back down to test this trend line, that's not a bad thing. That's actually probably what you'd want to see. You don't want to see I mean, I guess you'd want to see it if you have calls in IWM, but you generally don't want to go straight up, right? You want to have a pullback and then kind of a base form at this previous resistance, now acting as support, and then a move to the upside after that. So all in all, the fact that we did break out is very bullish for these small caps. Why wouldn't someone load up on SQQ in the short term with it so low and pull back around the corner? I mean, somebody can do that. That's very much a possibility. Everybody's got their own trading style. So, I'm not here to say one style or way of trading is worse than the other. If someone's playing the SQQ, that's completely fair. Michael, half of my portfolio is in IWM. All right. Well, I hope IWM continues to move up for you. Going into the VIX, one thing that I want to touch on the VIX is just the seasonality of the volatility index. This is something that I like to look at a lot, especially day of the week seasonality. So what that means is we're looking at each day of the week and how it has performed. And what you'll notice is Monday has a pretty high win rate. Historically speaking, Monday is the day for VIX. And even we couldn't even close green today. Now we did gap up from Friday's close, but then we just melted down. So we'll have to see if this higher low holds from the June 1st low. But you can see going into the rest of the week, the VIX is kind of melting throughout the week, with Friday only having a 24% win rate. So that's something to consider on the VIX, that this isn't necessarily going into the rest of the week the strongest time for the VIX. Now, Bitcoin is the next one. I really am kind of including this in the broad market side of things now, just because it's and we broke down. All righty, this just happened. Yep, not really shocked about that. So this is definitely not a strong sign for Bitcoin. We just broke down through this symmetrical triangle here. That is definitely a red flag. Now, for those that are bullish on Bitcoin, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if we do a measured move here on Bitcoin, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take this measured move from the high to the low, and then we're just going to apply that to this new move here. So if we did that, that would put us right around 19,800, around 20,000. Let's just call it a psychological level. So definitely something to consider on crypto. Bitcoin's breaking down. Been waiting for this to kind of resolve to the upside or the downside. With these symmetrical triangles, it's kind of hard to tell which way it's going to resolve. But anytime you have a move down, you have this bearish pennant, it's not shocking to see that this kind of start the next leg down here. So Bitcoin not looking great. Honestly, I think some of this crypto capital is definitely flowing back into the markets. This is generally this higher risk capital, which is exactly what these small caps need. The high risk capital flowing back into growth names, into this high risk capital is exactly what you'd want to see here. So that's Bitcoin. Ethereum. How are your pupils not burning? Why? Because the screen's so bright. I prefer the bright screen. So I know the white background does hurt some people's eyes, but this is kind of what I'm used to. Same thing with Ethereum. We're breaking down. You can see here we kind of had this ascending triangle form. We are starting to break down even on Ethereum, and so that is definitely something to consider on the crypto side. But on the small cap side of thing, I think that capital is going to flow right back into growth names, small cap, like it's already done. But a lot of people are so used to March to middle of May, these 10% pops in growth, and then you get a fade. Well, these aren't fading now. Look at FUBO. Look at some of these other names. These are not fading. They are just continuing to go up. And if we have capital flowing out of crypto, which, as I mentioned, is generally that higher risk capital, that risk appetite for these people and these traders playing crypto is probably not going to go into Home Depot. It's not going to go into Lowe's. It's probably going to go into those volatile names like your FUBOs of the world, your SKLZs of the world, those types of things. So the next one, before we jump into some of these individual names, let's look at Dogecoin. Crazy enough, Dogecoin was actually leading the pack here for a little bit. Doge USD Kraken. What's old Doge doing? Not much. But one thing to keep in mind with Dogecoin is it does respect these supply and demand zones really well. So if you haven't used these sensitivity alerts on TrendSpider yet, this is a great case study on it. I have the anchored view app from this swing high on May 7th. And so that's where I want to start the new volume weighted average price from. That's when the status quo changed. That's when the trend reversed. So from this point, notice one, that we did respect this pretty well. We did have a little bit of margin of error around it back in mid-May, but notice how we moved almost perfectly up to this level again back in early June. And this is where you'd want to use a sensitivity alert. So if I right click, create alert at this line, notice how I can make this area bigger or smaller. So even though the price didn't get exactly to this anchored view app above, this is where you use the sensitivity feature to be alerted anytime the price touches this purple area, rather than just touching that exact anchored view app above. So all in all, you know, crypto kind of looks like it's breaking down. If we draw a trend line here, you can also see it's starting to potentially break down as well. So definitely keep that in mind on the crypto side of things. Now, I will go into some chart requests. It already looks like we have a couple of DOCU, XHB. But before that, let's look at some of these growth names. Some of these names that have just put up some huge moves to the upside. Starting with FUBO. I mean, FUBO looks absolutely ridiculously strong here. Full disclosure, I do have a position. This is one that I got into back around 38. And then I averaged down at 29. Then I did my final scale in at 21. So I did finally break the break-even barrier here. So I am up on this finally. And remember, just scaling in, dollar cost averaging can really help. 3-4 weeks ago, people thought you were crazy for dollar cost averaging into some of these growth names. And all of a sudden they're blowing up. Now, one thing that I did want to look at here is the measured move. So if you look at the measured move from the last time we bounced off this support trend line back in September 2020, we moved up about 625% from that low to the very high. If you use that same measured move from this low that we saw in early May, right after earnings, which was around 1430 or so, and we had the same measured move here, that would put FUBO at around $105. In about 3 months. Does that mean that FUBO is going to $105 in 3 months? No. But if you're looking at the measured move, what happened in the past, and you apply that here, that's what you'd be expecting. So we'll have to see how it plays out, but a really strong close day. We even hit over 31 today on FUBO. So I'm really thinking this one could be a big winner in the coming weeks. Another thing here to keep in mind is the gap above. So if you look at the gap above on FUBO, there is a gap around 39.40 or so. This is where I'd probably start selling some covered calls. I do like FUBO kind of on a longer term side of things. I do think FUBO could make a pretty big move in the coming days just based on how it looks. And if it did fill that gap above, that's where I'd probably sell some covered calls to bring in some premium there on my position. So, give a new source to learn option. There's a lot of different people on Twitter that have great stuff on options, but I can't really mention anything that it's just kind of out of my wheelhouse as far as I just don't want to get into the legal side of telling people about options. But there's a lot of resources. Just go on YouTube and type in what are calls, what are puts, and a lot of different things will pop up. So for me, what I'm doing is I'm going to sell covered calls. So that means that I'm selling the right to buy my shares at a higher price. So if we hit 39, I'd probably sell, depending on how strong the move is. For example, if we hit 38, 39 tomorrow, I'd probably sell covered calls at $50 because the premium, the implied volatility on those far out of the money calls are probably going to be pretty high. And then I don't have to sell my common shares unless we get to 50 or above. That's what a covered call is. So that is my strategy here on FUBO. We'll see how it plays out. But all in all, we just keep stair-stepping in a really strong mover on the growth side of things. PLTR, everybody's favorite. I do think PLTR is finally about to make its move here. So if we look at the volume by price anchored from the all-time highs, you'll see here that we do have quite a big volume shelf forming here. Kind of what we were just talking about on IWM. Anytime the price finally gets above this shelf, it can really act as a launch pad for price. And I do think that's probably about to happen here with PLTR. If we get rid of the volume by price and just look at basic kind of trend line setup here, you can see there's a pretty strong kind of ascending triangle forming here. So here's your resistance. And then we've got a pretty just linear kind of support here, which is going to act as your ascending triangle support. So notice here, we are definitely coiling up a little bit. So if we do break out, this would be the area to finally break out of. So, it really needs to break this previous high right around 24.85 or so. So definitely a pretty strong move on PLTR for the ascending triangle side of things. And we will have to see if we finally do get that breakout. This thing has been stuck now for months, like a lot of other growth names. But one thing that I'll point out here is we do have a gap above. So right around 31, I'd just call it 31.40. There is a gap above. Prices like to move towards gaps above and below. We don't have any more gaps below, so the only gap we'd be working on is this gap above. We also have a slight gap that barely didn't fill around 27.50, so that would be the first target around 27.50. If that breaks, look for around 31.40 for that next gap above. So that's PLTR. Another one that we'll look at, everybody's favorite, AMC. I don't even know what AMC did today. Not a ton. So AMC, it's hard to say with this one. I mean, you kind of have this pennant forming. You kind of have a breakout today. This type of deal. Actually, no, you don't. You pretty much hit resistance right on the head. So I would kind of look at AMC this way. You kind of got this pennant forming. If we break out, this could easily go and retest those 73 highs that we saw back last week. So we'll have to see if that actually breaks out. But definitely AMC, if we do break this pennant, watch out for a really quick move back to around 72, 73. GameStop is another one. GameStop is looking really good here. This may be the next runner. So if we get rid of all these things, I'm looking at the monthly chart here, to be completely honest with you. Some of these moves have been so big, you can't really see the full kind of move here unless you look at the monthly. So you can see here, kind of what we just saw in AMC, we just broke out of this pennant here on the monthly for GameStop. So, this is very bullish. Do I think GameStop could go back to its highs? Yes, absolutely. I mean, look at some of these market caps on Dogecoin. Even Ethereum is over 250 billion. I think it's still above that, depending on what it is. If it's crashing now, I don't know. But that's a lot of money. And you look at GameStop with a $16 billion market cap. That's nothing when you compare to some of these cryptos that, Dogecoin hasn't really proven itself other than being a meme stock and something that Elon Musk likes to pump. So if Dogecoin can hit upwards of $80 billion market cap at its highs, GameStop being a $16, $17 billion market cap is nothing. Same with AMC. I think AMC is back to probably 20 billion or so. I'm not sure on that exact number, but these market caps are really not that big when you compare to some of these crypto names. So GameStop's looking really good. Nice pennant on the monthly side of things breaking out. Next one is FSLY. FSLY is one of my favorite names right now. If you look at the daily chart, it's just moving into like this blue sky above area. So if we turn on the volume by price and we start it from this previous swing high here, notice what we've got. I mean, you've got really no supply above until we get to around 6. I mean, technically the price gap above is right around 57.60, but you don't really hit a bunch of supply until you get to around 67. So not only do you have a price gap above, you just don't have really any shares at all. So notice here, the price gap is here, but you still don't have a lot of shares, a lot of supply above until you really get to that 65 to 67 area. And that's where break-even supply would probably create some resistance. But for now, FSLY is looking really good. When this thing moves, it moves, whether that's to the upside or the downside. It's very volatile. So this could definitely be one to watch for a continuation. A lot of people, like I said, have this kind of scar in their head over the last 3 months where, these FSLYs of the world have a big bar like this and then they fade. Well, I think we're at the point where some of these big moves are just starting. That may seem crazy, but I do think a lot of these names could go a lot more than just these big moves that we've had over the last couple weeks. So, there's a couple other ones to look at. We'll look at those. I have a couple more names to go over. I mean, these are some of my favorite names to look at. These are very strong setups. FSLY, NNDM is another one, Nano Dimension. And this is one that I want to go over the volume within the candle. So notice here on Friday, we had this wick. This wick was more than 50% of the entire range of Friday's move. So, a lot of people may look at this and think that that's bearish. I looked at it on Friday and I saw something completely different. Look at all that volume within that wick. That's a lot of volume profile within the wick of this Friday candle. So to me, this was kind of a gimme. Like on Monday morning, this was today. This was definitely one to watch for a continuation up, and we moved right back into that wick. We have a lot of volume at the top of the range once again today. I think this thing could definitely take off, especially considering it's at $8.14. And a few months ago, it was trading at 17. So, some of these names are just starting to get moving. We're just starting to break above this volume shelf, which is where most people are break even. So this could be a huge mover in the next couple weeks. And we'll just have to see if that plays out. We'll go over this one again, next week on Monday and see how it played out. ACB is another one. If you're looking at weed names, definitely take a look at ACB. ACB is one that I'm liking more on the monthly side of things. So if you look at the monthly chart, I mean, look at this inverse head and shoulders that's forming. Absolutely beautiful. If you anchor the volume by price from the all-time highs here, you'll see that we do need to get through some supply before we really get going. But if this can close above about 1250, this inverse head and shoulders is going to kind of materialize. Actually, we'd probably need to close, probably closer to 14 for this to really get out of that inverse head and shoulders. But the main thing is getting through this big point of control, this big volume node right around probably 1250 is the top of that volume node. So those are some of the names that I really like going into the week, the month ahead. And these are names that I personally am watching. One name that I am currently in right now that I am trading, VISL. Really like VISL right now. I'll tell you why. One, we just broke out of this longer term downtrend. So you can see here that we finally broke out of this area about a week and a half ago. And so same thing that we just talked about on FSLY, you have this area highlighted in orange, which is a gap. So you have this gap here, not a lot of liquidity until you hit around 295 all the way up to around 310. If you anchor a VWAP from this high, you'll see that the anchored VWAP is actually around 325 to 330. So, we're at 273 right now. This is definitely a candidate that can move pretty quickly. As I mentioned, I do have a position. I got in on this breakout here, so I started buying on this candle here. I think my average is around 256. So, this is one that I have a target to around, let's say, as I mentioned, around 295. And if we really get a strong move, this could hit around 330 with some overshoot. So we'll just have to see how strong this supply resistance zone is above. So that's one. SDC is another one that I like. Kind of looks very similar to FSLY, but the problem with SDC is it's just doesn't trade that great. I mean, you do have the same setup as FSLY, but FSLY is a lot more of a popular stock. It can get momentum a lot quicker, but this one does have a pretty high short percent. So SDC could be a short squeeze candidate if it did continue up. We do have that price gap and that supply zone right around, let's say 1050 or so. So we'll have to see if this one can get through this this volume gap and price gap above. Now, let's look at some individual names that some of you guys mentioned. LEXX, I'm not sure how big of a market cap LEXX is. I don't really honestly love talking about small market caps on a feed that has 150 people on it. But I'm just curious what the market cap is on this. Next, or LEXX, not next. Market cap's 35 million. I really don't love talking about market caps that small, but on the daily, you are starting to move up. You've got this wick here way at 885. We'll just have to see what happens. But yeah, that's a pretty small market cap. I'd rather not go in too depth in that. Just don't want to even potentially move the market with live people on here. DOCU. I think DOCU did pretty well today. Yeah, DOCU looks pretty good. I mean, a lot of the time I'm just looking at the weekly or the monthly. So you can see here DOCU's pretty much been stuck now for the last 10 months. Is that right? 11 months? Yeah, DOCU is just trading this weird range. So, I mean, this is a candidate for just a huge move to the upside if we can clear these previous highs. So, yeah, you got this huge volume shelf here. Let's see the monthly chart. Yeah, the monthly candle looks great. The only problem is we're only a week into the trading month of June. So, if we do anchor the volume by price from this low back in November of 2018, you will see quite a few shares aggregating here, kind of creating this shelf for price. And yeah, DOCU looks very strong right here. Definitely looking pretty good. XHB, home builders. Yeah, this one, the monthly candle is not incredibly inviting for the long side of things. You can see here that we are starting to break down. I would say watch for a break below 71.25, pretty much this previous low. That's when things start getting a little iffy. Now on the daily side of things, it's holding relatively well at what it topped out back in early May. So if we anchor volume by price from this point here, you do have a nice volume shelf forming here. So you do have volume kind of supporting price down here. You do have a gap above from around 79. So that's something to also consider on XHB. Now what's another one? Oracle, ORCL. Let's see if some of these names have any historical strength. Oracle, really strong move here. Let's anchor from this low here in January. Here's a great example of the volume shelf kind of becoming this launch pad for price. Just a ton of shares here. Price is able to bounce really hard off of it. Now, one thing I'm curious is, how does Oracle trade on a monthly basis around this time of year? Let's start this from 2016. June is a historically pretty strong time of the year with an 80% win rate. So yeah, definitely a strong year. Strong month of the year. And then going into July and August, you still have some pretty strong seasonality. So looking at the monthly seasonality, definitely worth noting that we are in a rather strong time of the year. DKNG, I think all of these names, Penn, DKNG, all had pretty strong moves today. These are all the names that haven't done anything for the last, long time. So we topped out in March for DKNG. Oh, this is beautiful. Check this out. So you can see we're just stair-stepping up these volume shelves, right? So Volume creates a base for price. We move up. Why was price able to move up so quickly today? Well, we're in this next volume gap. You don't have a lot of liquidity until we get to around 56. And when I say liquidity, I mean people that are back to break even. So once the price gets to around, let's say 56 all the way to 58, that's where these shares that just held from, let's say you bought DraftKings at 58, it drops all the way down to 40. You just dealt with a 31% drawdown. So as the price moves back up to where you're break even, you're probably going to take some off the table. And that's with a lot of growth names right now. A lot of people held through, they're back to break even, they're getting out. And, to each their own, but I think selling at break even for some of these growth names is just, you held that long, you might as well keep holding. That's just what I'm doing with my FUBOs of the world. I mean, I think I was down 50% at one point on FUBO when it dropped to 1430 that morning after earnings. So, I mean, everyone's got to do what works for their style, their personality. But, dealing with a 50% drawdown, then selling at break even, great, you got your money back. But what if these continue to move up and these aren't just quick, moves up and then they're faded? What if this is actually a new kind of status quo in the market for growth names that could continue up? DraftKings, Penn, all these names, sports are going to be coming back. Football is going to be absolutely just a crazy place, industry to be in. Gambling on football, all of these things are going to be coming back in just a massive strides. So, that's just my take on it. I would be shocked if we didn't hit the 56 to 57 area this week, but we'll have to see. CLOV is definitely another one. Yeah, SWW. I mean, if you sell covered calls on FUBO and you're down or whatever, you average down, you can drop your average cost by just selling covered calls way out of the money. I personally don't like to sell covered calls on something like FUBO until I'm probably 10 to 15% up on my position. And then if we move up another, big strong day at 10%, I can go sell $45 covered calls. And God forbid I have to sell at a 50% gain on my common stock and I pocket the premium. So yeah, selling covered calls on some of these big moves kind of makes sense versus just selling the stock and going, at break even. Let's see. What was the next one? CLOV. I think CLOV had a really big move today too. Clover Health. Wow. Yeah, nice. Almost back to the SPAC or a little over the SPAC price now. Yeah, CLOV has been a big mover. The main thing I would look at here is just this pretty easy to spot resistance above. So if we were to continue to move up, this would naturally just be the resistance level I would watch above, which is around 13. If you anchor the VWAP from the high here, we're already past, the anchored VWAP. So we're already through that. You could use this gap. So we do have a slight gap on Clover that didn't fully fill. This gap is around 1380 or so. So that would definitely be something to consider. And that is almost right in line with this resistance. Now, keep in mind, anytime you're looking, and I kind of like preach this, anytime you're looking at diagonal resistance is a function generally of if you went straight up the next day, right? So if I said, yeah, diagonal resistance is at 1380, that would assume that price goes straight up tomorrow to 1380 and fills that gap. But what if we have something like this? Then your resistance is going to be at 1320. So it's declining with time. So the more time it takes for the price to get to that line, the lower that resistance is going to be. So if we did move straight up again tomorrow, this 1375, 1380, which is the gap above, would be a target to watch. So yeah, that CLOV, very strong move today. Nice move there. Nokia. What is that? NOK? Yeah. Ooh, this one looks pretty good too. It's just so gappy. I mean, look at how much it gaps. I don't know if that's because it kind of moves with the overseas market, with it being a foreign company or what, but Yeah, I mean, if it retested these highs back in January, late January, you know, that would be around $9. I say it's possible. If we look at the volume by price from the low here, got a little bit of a shelf forming. But yeah, this Nokia looks pretty good, honestly. And going into July, Nokia has an 80% win rate. So June isn't a really strong time of the year. So if we can have a strong June into historically what would be a strong month of July, this could be setting up for a really big move into the summer months. So yeah, Nokia looks decent. OIH, I think that's oil, right? Yeah, oil. So OIH, I think we're rotating out of some of these names, these oil companies, these you know, these larger caps. I think growth is where it's. I think we're going to see another January, February type move in some of these growth names. And I'm willing to say that and willing to be completely wrong, but that's just what I'm seeing, especially when we look at IWM. That's just breaking out. It hasn't even broke the March highs yet. So that's why I'm so bullish on these small cap growth names. Just because you look at OIH, you look at some of these other names that are starting to break down a little bit. I mean, look at Amazon. Amazon is looking horrible. I mean, it doesn't look that bad, but if you look at the trend line here, I'm just going to kind of use this low to this period here. We've kind of broken down here. So we'll have to see, you know, if some of these larger cap names continue to break down while the money's flowing into some of these growth names. Notice today, SPY was down, and some of these growth names are up 15 to 20%. This is definitely more of an individual name market right now rather than just the broad markets all moving together. So you can definitely see capital flowing into these smaller names. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm not going to be able to get to all of these. We have about 10 more minutes left. I'm just going to go in order. So PBR. That's an interesting chart. Not too familiar with this one. But yeah, I mean, this one looks pretty strong on the monthly chart. You know, I think if we just drew actually, let's turn on the auto trends and see what the auto trends finds here. Just change this to original. Yeah, okay. So this is why I love the auto trends. I didn't even see this honestly until just now. So you kind of have this kind of loosely formed symmetrical triangle here. If we did continue up, this area above 15 to 16 would be possibly a target above for PBR, at least on the monthly side of things. Notice since 2016 as well, June and July do have an uptick in historical seasonality. So, you know, a decently strong time of the month, month of the year for PBR. So hopefully that was helpful. AAL, airlines. Yeah, I mean, American Airlines, you kind of have that, you know, healthy pullback on this move up, but I'm not convinced on airlines. Like I said, I think there's going to be a ton of capital flowing into more growth than your airlines and some of these value names that have gone up, your GEs of the world. I mean, GE still looks pretty good, but I mean, it's not participating, you know, with the moves that you're seeing in some of these other names. Now, you could have a little bit of a flag here and continue up. That's definitely possible for like something like GE, but also keep in mind you do have this gap below in the 1340 area. So that's something to consider. So airlines not looking great. GE maybe kind of forming a flag for the next leg up. We'll have to see. But you can never assume this is going to be a flag, right? You generally want to create your trend lines, and or an anchored VWAP from this point. Once that breaks, that kind of confirms it. But to assume this is going to be a flag, you still have to see the price action prove that. Yes, Dion, I did CLOV, or Dion, I did CLOV already. 1380 gap above. CHWY, we already went over Nokia. CHWY looks good. CHWY's another one that's just been absolutely beaten down. For really, I mean, no, yeah, CHWY, wow. I mean, if you anchor a VWAP from this high here, CHWY's going to probably find some resistance around 83. Right now it's 78, so that's still almost another, 7 to 8% to the upside before we hit this anchored VWAP above. If we start the volume by price from this high as well, you'll see here that we do have a lot of supply to get through right here. So, from around 78 all the way up to 83, that's a lot of supply that CHWY would need to get through. But if it can get through this shelf and we get something like this, very similar to what we saw on FUBO, up, pull back, and then blast off, that could easily happen as well for CHWY. So definitely something to keep in mind, that there's a lot of supply we need to get through there. And who knows, earnings could be the trigger for that. GoPro. Ooh, nice flag here. But remember, it needs to prove itself. But it looks better than GE at this point. So yeah, nice little flag here. It's not going to be perfect. What I like to do is I just like to take this and pretty much just clone this. It's not going to be perfect, but here's your here's your flag forming. I would definitely say a break above this trend line here would be kind of a start to a bigger move. But for now, it's just kind of trading within this flag here. So that is GoPro. GoPro from April to August has a 60% win rate. Not too much there. You can definitely see September's the strongest month of the year over the last 5 years with an 80% win rate. So keep that in mind. CHPT, charge point, another one that just gotten beaten down. Finally starting to kind of show some strength here. If you anchor a VWAP from this high, we did close above it, so that's good. So closing above this VWAP here is definitely what you want to see. And remember, it's never a bad thing to kind of pull back, retest that VWAP, and kind of go like that. So definitely strong. The fact that CHPT did close above this anchored VWAP, that's kind of a status quo changer there. Trying to get to as many of these as I can before we run out of time. RIOT. I can't imagine RIOT doing too well if crypto's breaking down. Yeah, RIOT. I mean, I just hate this company, if you want my honest opinion. I just can't stand the fact that they turned this company from like a pharma company to a blockchain company just to play the hype. I guess some people call that smart. I think it's just absolutely just seems like fraudulent to me. But yeah, RIOT not looking great, especially with crypto breaking down after close today, at least on the U.S. markets. Sorry, Michael, I'm not going to be able to get to EOG. I want to get through some of these other names that have been requested. You're welcome, Leah. Kevin. So it looks like Christian, Kevin, Jazz. We'll try to get through XBI, UWMC, and then CLNE. Or I'll do CLNE after XBI. XBI looks amazing. I mean, this thing's been beaten down. If you look at this is your anchored VWAP pinch here. So we're kind of coiling up here. We need to break this 137, 138 area to really get going. But remember, you always want to anchor the VWAP from the swing high. Learn this directly from a big mentor to me, Brian Shannon, the one who pretty much evangelized the anchored VWAP. So shout out to Brian for teaching me all he did about the anchored VWAP. So until we break through this anchored VWAP here, you really want to see this VWAP kind of flatten out. And then that's when things get interesting. But at most, you want to see a close above this anchored VWAP. This is the weekly candle, so keep that in mind. But also keep in mind that June has the highest win rate. June and November both have an 80% win rate over the last 5 years. So that is something to keep in mind, that we are historically in a pretty strong time of the year for XBI. So watch 138, 137.50 to 138 as being an area above. CLNE. That's the weekly. Let's look at the daily. Not too much to go off of here. Clean energy fuels. Let's see what the auto trend says. Yep. This is why I love auto trend. Sometimes it will literally highlight exactly what you're looking for. In this case, this is exactly what I probably would have highlighted. Notice that we closed pretty much right at this resistance line. Now, nice falling wedge. If we can break out of it, that could bring in some breakout buyers and continue this up. You'd want to see a break of around 11.25 to really get going on CLNE. So hopefully that helped. Jazz. UWMC is the last one we're going to get to here. Ooh, looks good. On the daily, you kind of got this stair step thing going. When I say stair step, I just mean this. Here's your stair, here's your step, here's your stair, here's your step. So, you know, that would kind of be what to look for here. But all in all, if we do anchor the volume by price from the low, I'm sure there's nice, a nice shelf forming here. So I like UWMC. That looks really good. So I forgot who asked about that. Kevin. Yeah, Kevin, UWMC looks good. Whoa, Andrew. I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Oh, RIOT. Oh, okay, Andrew. don't sell just because I said it doesn't look good. That's not what this is for. I'm just helping you guys look at the charts. As I mentioned, I personally don't like RIOT from just the way the CEO and some of that weird stuff has gone on, but it is a proxy for crypto, or kind of has been. So just keep that in mind. Don't take any of this analysis and go randomly, sell the house because I don't like something. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean that it's going down. I'm no better than anyone else. I'm just giving my opinion, kind of what I'm seeing there. Andrew, I appreciate, that you're taking what I'm saying, but don't just go randomly sell because I said I don't like it. Okay, that is all the time we have for today. We got a lot of charts in today. Remember, I'm using TrendSpider. I'm one of the founding team members of TrendSpider. So this is by far, obviously, my favorite technical analysis platform. There's a ton of things that you can use on the platform. We always have the BZ25 coupon code that you can use for 25% off any plan, either monthly or annual. So definitely check it out. Next time we go over charts, you can go right along with me using the platform and see what I'm seeing using TrendSpider. So remember, we have a 7-day free trial. There's nothing to lose. You can try this stuff out. Hopefully the analysis that I did on some of these stocks were helpful, but remember, this is not advice. This is just me looking at some charts with you guys, and hopefully it's helpful getting another perspective in the markets. I'll hand it back over to the Benzinga team, but thank you guys so much for joining in. We had a big crowd today, almost 150 people. So thank you everybody for the chart requests. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and really appreciate everybody's time today. And remember, 25% off BZ25. Get TrendSpider. Join me in doing these charts every Monday. And hopefully everybody has a great rest of the trading week. And I'm handing it back over to Aaron.